Hello everyone, my name is Léonie Lefebvre. I'm an Erasmus student studying at the University Pablo de Olavide in Sevilla, in Spain, during the first semester of the year 2022. The project of Book Club and Sociological Listening is about the pioneers and founders of sociology. It is a lecture introduction to sociology. The lecturer and coordinator of the project is Dra. Maria José del Pino Espero. Today I'm going to present one of the original texts of Florence Kelley about the Illinois child labor law. But firstly, I'm going to introduce the author of this text. Who is Florence Kelley? She is an American social and political reformer in the sense that she contributed to the development of state and federal labor and social welfare legislation in the USA. She dedicated her entire life to end many social problems like labor and racial discrimination. She was a member of the Chicago School, a school of thought originating of Chicago in the beginnings of the 20th century. Florence Kelley grew up in a familiar context of social activism. Her parents, both abolitionists, supported Kelley's interest in education and women's rights. She was graduated from Cornell University in 1882, ranked among the most prestigious universities in the world. She organized evening classes for working women in Philadelphia before traveling in Europe, where she attended in the University of Zurich. She was influenced by the European socialism and joined the German Social Democratic Party. Her translation of Friedrich Engels' The Condition of the Working Class in England in 1844 is proof of this. This translation was published in New York in 1887. The Marxism influence led her to critique the industrial capitalism and its exploitation of workers, especially in the form of child labor. She gets married with Lazar Wisniewski, a Polish-Russian medical student, in 1884 that she meets during her journey in Europe. She returned to the US in 1886 and published 3 years after a pamphlet outlawing children, in which one she asked people not to buy goods made by child workers. The children working was one of her bigger struggles. In 1891, the couple divorced and Florence moved to Chicago and became a resident at Jane Addams Hull House settlement. Among the most active and effective workers like Jane Addams, Julia Lathrop, Ellen Gates Starr. She was hired to investigate the labor industry in the city, and she conducted investigation into slums conditions in Chicago and into sweatshops in the tenements. The Hull House was one of the first social settlements in the North America, founded in 1889 by James Adams. Firstly, the initial objective of the renting of this house was to aid the needy immigrants. Then, Hull House opened as a kindergarten and later a day nursery and an infancy care center were included. And with time, Hull House became a complex of social, cooperative clubs, shops, housing for children, and playgrounds. Her reports and sociological investigations were published in the book Hull House Maps and Papers, published in 1895, which brings together a series of essays and statistical information collected by Florence Kelley and her colleagues at Hull House. The compilation was in fact a set of commentaries focusing on several different topics and communities. In this book, the authors tried to show how people lived and worked in the worst slums in Chicago, where the tenements and sweatshops were. A contribution to the book portrays a picture of miserable working living conditions. She revealed how a productive process driven by the accumulation of capital threatened the health of all people and hindered social development. Her findings led to changes in working conditions for laborers. The Illinois law of 1833 that limited working hours for women regulated child labor, prohibiting the employment of children under age of 14. This law was nourished in grand part by the results of her findings. In consequence, she was appointed to the post of Chief Factory Inspector for Illinois. She was the first woman to hold this position. As inspector, she tried to force sweet shops to follow the rules to treat the employees better. What shows her determination to fight against the sweet shops is her inscription in the law school of Northwestern University, where she graduated in 1894. She was admitted to the bar in becoming a lawyer. In 1899, Kelley moved to New York City to become the head of the new National Consumer League, an organization founded to fight for the welfare of consumers and workers who had little power in the marketplace and workplace. She wanted to unite consumers and laborers in a campaign to improve industrial relations, showing that a radical transformation of social relations was necessary in order to stop the degradation of life. The National Consumer League's main aims were especially the imposition of a minimum wage and the limitation of working hours. A time passed in the League led her to the creation of the White Label, which was given to stores treated employees fairly. Throughout her sociological researches, she tried to raise the awareness of citizens that she asked to support workers' rights by only shopping at businesses that had the white label. Then she went to Lillian Ward's Henry Street settlement and set about the work of promoting federal legislation on hours and wages and child labor. She was very determined to change the legislation on these topics and organized some 60 local and state consumers leagues and traveled. She led in organizing the New York Child Labor Committee in 1992, and in 1904 she was a founder of the National Child Labor Committee. All her efforts contributed to the creation of the U.S. Children's Bureau in 1912. On the subject of the integration of Afro people into the society, she co-founded the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People in 1909. Because Kelley's investigation into labor conditions made her aware of how different races were being treated differently in the workplace. For several years, she served as vice president of the National American Women's Suffrage Association. Now, we will briefly present the context of the writing of the text of Florence Kelley. So, the Illinois Child Labor Law is a paper written by Florence Kelley and read before the 11th Annual Convention of the International Association of Factory Inspectors at Detroit on the 1st of September in 1897. Actually, at this time, she became a chief of factory inspectors in the state of Illinois. The text is collected in the American Journal of Sociology, the first scholarly journal in the sociological field published in January 1898. We can suppose that the origin of the text comes from an investigation around the settlement at Hull House in 1891, surveying the working conditions in local factories. She found children as young as 3 or 4 of age working in tenement sweet shops. The report of this survey in Chicago was presented to the state, resulting in the Illinois state legislature in 1833, as I said. She was appointed as the factory inspectors, like I said, with the task of monitoring the application of this law. So this paper was read in order to remind inspectors of their duties and show them the merits of the Illinois law. This text perfectly shows her determination in making the children's living conditions better. It also gives us a clue about its big ambitions. After having succeeded at the regional level, she seeks to contribute to improve child labor legislation at the international level. But what is the children working exploitation in terms of figures? In the United States, in the beginning of the 20th century, more than 1.5 million children worked an average of 14 hours a day, sometimes more, day and night. That is the reality of the life of children at this time. And on the end of the 19th century, Florence Kelley and other sociological reformers observed the wave of state child labor legislation. For example, the states of Massachusetts and Connecticut passed the nation's first child labor regulation in 1842, limiting the workday to 10 hours for children under 12 and 14 years of age, respectively. Now I'm going to read relevant extracts of this text. No one knows, as the factory inspector knows them, the needs of the working children. No one sees, as he sees them, the evils attending their work. If he does not take the initiative in this matter, who should do so? If he leaves it to the trade unions, there is danger that each may think only of the need of its own memberships. Then the laws will indeed be special legislation, and the precedent of handling them will be strange to it. Or if union men employ children or use the labor supplied by the corporation, then may the public wait long, but the initiative will never be taken. If the inspection departments wait for the philanthropist, hospital may be built for the repair of newsboys who have been run over, but never a proposition urged that unemployed men should sell the papers and the boys go to school. Vacation may be arranged for cash children, but no urgency shown that the errands be done by phones and tube and the children sent to get manual training. The medical fraternity bewails the increase of consumption in the great cities, but do they help to banish little girls from laundries or advise legislation shortening the hours and equalizing the temperature in the ironing rooms? The initiative in all these things comes best from officials of the state who have technical knowledge not alone of the places in which work is done, but of the law as interpreted by the courts in the course of the endeavor to enforce it. Until 1833, Illinois ranked with the most backward of the southern and southwestern states in its care of the health, education, and welfare of working children. Although in the census of 1890, Illinois ranks third among the great manufacturing states of the Union when measured by the value of its manufactured product. After years of ceaseless agitation of the subject, Illinois at last takes rank among the half-dozen states in which the lowest limit of the legal age for work is 14 years, not for manufacture alone, but for commercial occupation as well. As it stands today, after many changes and improvements, the child labor law of Illinois prohibits absolutely the employment of any child under the age of 14 years for wages in any mercantile institution, store, office, or laundry, as well as in any manufacturing establishment, factory, or workshop. The inspectors are closed with no authority to exempt any child from this absolute provision, and poverty or orphanhood can no longer cloak the exploitation of young children in department stores or in the telegraph and messenger service, if the law is enforced. By studying the text, I noticed that despite the successful adoption of this law, Florence Kelley does not seem to be fully satisfied. We can, for example, see that she began her text by drawing a negative balance of the 11 years existence of the International Association of Factory Inspectors by writing that some of the laws in states with highly developed manufacture represented in this association dating back unchanged and unimproved no less than 14 years. In the text, she establishes an hypothesis that would explain the negative balance that she depicts at the beginning of the text. Perhaps that the slow development of the legislation of factory comes from the complex form of which the reports are established by the inspector, what makes complicated their understanding by the public opinion and the legislators. After she focused on the Illinois legislation, explaining the factors of the delay in enacting valid child labor legislation. One of them is the lack of the textile industry in the state, therefore of organized body or intelligent working people in daily contacts with young children in factories. Actually, she noted that the main factor of legislation protecting working children is the presence of men and women working side by side with children. She also noted a second factor, which is the number of children working in the factory. The fewer of them there are, the less obvious it is to act on their behalf. Throughout the text, despite the progress observed by the law, Florence Kelley continues to qualify her words because the result of the extension of the law of 1893, meaning the law of children work in 1897, as she said, is not sensational. The figures of the exemption from the ban on child labor in certain economic sectors like offices show that. Florence, in her text, told that in July and August, the dullest months in the year, there were more than 1,200 boys and girls between 14 and 16 years of age in these 5 establishments, one of them being the largest employer of children in the state with 461 affidavits on file. The affidavits, we will see later, they are a type of permits to work for children. Florence Kelley tried to find the explanation of the exemption from the ban on child labor. For example, there are the slowness to prosecute or no communication to the press of their guilt, while the excessive employment of children could be a strong argument to make law against the department store, and the office has enough evidence for the conviction of this manager, but the numbers of children are so great. Florence insists that obtaining an exact compliance with the law is very difficult with the complicated requirements and terms of the law. Actually, 2 inspectors are necessary each month, devoting an entire day to each store to follow a well-done inspection. The men are not sufficient to obtain the results desired by the law. And as Florence said, the provisions of the law are not always clear, precise, and explicit. For example, in the text, Florence talks about one of the provisions of the law, which is the prohibition of children under 16 years of age in extra hazardous occupation. But what does it mean concretely? Florence Kelley went on to qualify her words. Despite a provision of the law which instaurs a maximum of 10 hours of work in one day, nor 60 in a week, she showed that the department stores and the sweet shops use a second work team to work until very late in the night in order to circumvent the law. Finally, Florence Kelley established a long-time problem. despite the adoption of this law, it is the no enforcement of the law. In the past, neither of the compulsory education law of 1891 and the lands law of 1891 was enforced. No prosecution was ever undertaken under them. And it is the same for the 1893 and 1897 Illinois child labor law, because the employers, from an either manner, can circumvent the provisions of the law. Now we can see that Florence Kelley wants to remind that the adoption of the law is not always synonymous of progress in protection of working children, by highlighting the long-time problem of the non-enforcement of the law. So the adoption of the law is more a first step in a long process, but she stays positive by showing the efforts and accomplishment of the law. For example, in the extract of the focus on the Illinois legislation, Florence provides a very positive assessment of the legislation in Illinois by explaining that the Illinois state was considered as a very backward state. At last, it takes rank among the half-dozen states in which the lowest limit of the legal age for work is 14 years. So she congratulates the inspector for perfectly applying the law and for having accomplished their mission. She takes the example of Illinois as an ideal to follow, showing that all is possible thanks to the respect of the law and the good attitude of the inspectors. Like I said, despite these few advances, Florence returns to the defect of the law, and she insists that everything is still to come. These laws are only the first step, and she gives us a clue to the legal context of the implement of the new child labor legislation. Actually, on the 15th of March of 1895, was pronounced unconstitutional by the Supreme Court of Illinois, the 8 Hours Law. She wants to show by this way that the legislation of the child labor is a first step, a new departure. This court decision also shows the difficult context in which Florence Kelley is fighting to regulate child labor. For her, the larger problem is the non-enforcement of the law, and she tried to explain the reception of the law by its recipients by a philosophical manner. Citizens enforced nothing except what was popular or seemed likely to be popular. And we were in a time when the child labor law was not popular. It was not seen as a public issue. So the employers and all citizens were negligent. Finally, Florence Kelley, in her text, suggests many solutions, and she insists on the role of the inspectors in the enforcement and the interpretation of the law. At the beginning of the text, Florence Kelley established a reminder of the task given to factory inspectors by insisting on the importance of their posts. They alone can prevent the disastrous situation in which children grow up. They have the weight of their future on their back. She insisted on the importance of their post by showing that other organizations don't have the power to protect children from exploitation labor, for example, the trade unions or the hospital. And it is not necessary for her to count on the morals of the society, which prefers to organize vacation with the money earned by the children than to take them to school. So we observe that Florence Kelley believed in the state to change the children's situation thanks to its technical knowledge of the places of the factories and then of the interpretation of the law by the courts. Furthermore, Florence, when she talked about the affidavits, besides the legal requirement, she suggests to add educational and minimal weight requirements to grant the affidavits to children. So we see that the law is not always adapted to the social reality, and it implies the role of the inspectors to apply the law in the best possible way. It means taking into account the social realities. For her, the law must be respected, but above all applied in the interest of the child. And she is in favor of the enforcement of the requirements that affidavits must be filled before the children are set at work. So she found solutions to issues to improve the next legislation and to make it more efficient. And when she talked about one of the provisions of the law, which is the prohibition of children under 16 years of age in extra hazardous occupation, these words, the extra hazardous occupation, have been interpreted by the inspectors, as she said, always in the children's interests. That means that the employment of children in the manufacture of explosives, for example, should to be stopped immediately. The fact that the law is not always clear, precise, and explicit implies that the interpretation of the law by inspectors should be the one most favorable to the interest of children. To do this, she uses the feeling and emotion that she could bring to its listeners. For example, there is no tale more hideous in the history of manufacture than that of the little boy who was turned out of a fireworks factory by order of Inspector Jason because the child was under the legal age for work, and having waited for his 14th birthday to come, he returned to work at once, only to blow up the works, killing himself and his sister. For her, one of the most important defects of the law is the powerlessness of the inspectors, and especially in the laundries manufacture, by showing that children are always in danger in hot rooms not ventilated and cold. Florence Kelley is very explicit throughout the text because for her to solve the problem of the non-enforcement of the law, the only solution is the intervention of the inspectors, like a godsend who imposed to the lawless conduct of the employers the payment of a fine after inspectors prosecute all violation and suit was brought. By this way, she seeks to show the efficiency of the procedure of imposed fine after settling a deadline for compliance with the law. It gives a tips of pressure to employers, and for her, it is the best means of enforcing statutory provision. But we can criticize the ridiculous amount of the fine, the raise from $3 to $10, but that's not very dissuasive for the employment of children. At the end of her text, Florence Kelley suggests new measures to improve the child labor legislation, whose the main one is systematic supervision by inspectors. She wishes to give even more importance to the role of inspectors. For her, to improve the children's situation, the child labor law should be accompanied with the school law, allowing to be more efficient in factories later, acquiring industrial efficiency and value until the children reach an age past all need of child labor legislation. These two laws go hand in hand, and she shows that it is in force in other states. For her, to improve the children's situation, the child labor law should be accompanied with the school law, allowing to be more efficient in factories later, acquiring industrial efficiency and value until the children reach an age past all need of child labor legislation. These two laws go hand in hand. She thinks that it is more acceptable to think positively, you will go to school, rather than negatively, you will not work. The two laws are meant to be together. Actually, factory work will be always an alternative to the lack of school accommodation. She ends her text by establishing a list with the obstacles to the amelioration of the social condition by constitutional methods. She highlights the necessity to create laws without containing flaw of unconstitutionality, so the necessity to modernize the constitution. Besides the importance of the post of inspectors, she appeared to raise awareness of public opinion to support the compliance with the law. Throughout her text, we have clues of her political opinion. For example, when she said that there are still many steps which must be taken before it can be claimed for Illinois that we are giving to the rising generation of the working class the advantages to which the wealth and intelligence of the state entitle them. By this way, it is not wrong to say that she is a socialist. In the context of the newborn democracy in the USA, she gave a lot of importance of the democratic process. For her, it is necessary the public approval of the law. For example, the arbitrary addition of the minimal weight and educational acquirements to grant affidavits by the office. Florence Kelley shows and highlights that the public opinion drastically sustained this rule of the office. To conclude the context of the writing of the text, I remind that it was reading before the 11th annual convention of the International Association of Factory Inspectors, explains why this text seems to be a political or activist speech, in which Florence tries to convince people of the necessity to increase efforts to improve the children's life condition. The fact that Florence Kelley still seems dissatisfied after the adoption of the law proves that she is an ambitious and determined woman. Thank you for listening. Bye.